This morning we continue our series, How We Ascend. And just to give you a little bit of context, for those of you who might not be aware, so in life there's ups and downs, right? We have pits and we have mountaintops. We have highs and we have lows. And one of the fundamental questions that we all have is when we're in a low and when we're in a pit, when we're down, how do we get back up? And what is that like? You know, and there's all kinds of different methods that we'll deploy, whether that's numbing ourselves, distracting ourselves, energizing ourselves, or whatever. But there's this group of psalms, which are just poems in the Bible. They're called the Psalms of Ascent. And they're the kind of poems, and they're the kind of hymns that the Jewish people would sing or recite as they were coming from all over the world back to the land God had promised they would live in, and from there to Jerusalem to worship. So it's how do we go from this place of exile, despair, desolation, alienation, into a space of God's promise and into a space of God's presence. That's really what we're looking for. How do we ascend? And this morning, we have Psalm 123. I'm going to read it, and then Lee is going to come and share with us the sermon for this morning. So thank you, Lee. I'm pumped. But let me read Psalm 123, beginning in verse 1. I lift up my eyes to you who sit enthroned in heaven. As the eyes of slaves look to the hand of their master, as the eyes of a female slave looks to the hand of her mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord our God till he shows us mercy. Have mercy on us, Lord, have mercy on us. For we have endured no end of contempt. We have endured no end of ridicule from the arrogant, of contempt from the proud. Lee.
So, Psalm 123 then, a short psalm, also a short prayer, which is sometimes all we can manage in times of distress. Sometimes we just don't have the words. Sometimes the only words we have in our discomfort is, Lord, have mercy. In the situation, in the despair in the situation in our life. I lift my eyes to you. Someone here today might think, well, it's okay you saying that, but you don't know how long I've been in this valley for. You don't know how deep this pit is that I'm in. In fact, it's so deep, I'm just getting neck ache trying to look up. We've been talking about the descents and the ascents of life. We look at Joe or Bob down the road, and it doesn't seem to us that they have any descents. Their whole life seems to be one big ascent. Their life seems to be one big party. But the truth is, we don't really know what's happening behind closed doors. We don't know what's going on with them internally. I think it's important for us to be thankful when we experience an ascent, and it's important for us to be steadfast when we experience a descent in life. Joseph had dreams of greatness. He must have thought his ascent was about to happen, maybe only a matter of weeks or a few months away. But the reality was there was many years of descent. And just as Joseph thought he had hit rock bottom, he was wrong. There was another descent, and then another one. Thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison. Many seasons of descent for Joseph before his ascent into being effectively the next Prime Minister of Egypt, as we read in the Bible. Sometimes we want to write our will on a piece of paper and take it to God, and we want him to put the will of God stamp of approval on it and make it his own will. I can also imagine it felt like a pretty big descent for Moses, going from a royal upbringing in a palace to being in the wilderness for 40 years. And then the next verse in our psalm, we have, to you who sit enthroned in heaven. God is sovereign over all. He is on the throne. God cannot be voted out by Lib Dems or Tories for his throne. No one can say to him, you're not the rightful king. A government coup to remove God from power cannot happen. And God's kingdom is the only true stable governance from eternity past into everlasting future. And then we have this verse about looking at earthly masters, which we all have to do in some respect, but can be a difficult position to be in. I remember one job I used to do many years ago where me and my colleagues were paid correctly twice in 50 months. there was a bit of anger. Everyone got their money in the end, don't worry. But there was a bit of anger about this, but also some humour as well. Who's getting stitched up this month? And there was never an accidental overpayment, always an accidental underpayment. I think the payroll system must have had more gremlins than 90s movies put together. I think getting something wrong 48 times out of 50, I didn't really see it as total incompetence. I saw it as purposeful at the time. And just as a boss cannot overlook you for a promotion, can overlook you for a needed pay rise in a cost of living crisis, maybe also a boss can look at you a bit too much when the company is having to think about redundancy or reducing hours of employees. The company you work for can let you down. Your government can let you down. Your healthcare provider can let you down. This is why it's important to look to the Lord. His solution will probably be different from your solution. His timetable will probably be different from your expected timetable, but he does have a plan for your life. God has broad enough shoulders to handle our lament when we get frustrated. We're not used to waiting. We order our Big Mac, fries, and milkshake, and if we have to wait more than 4 minutes for it, it's a bit of a problem for us. So let us give our burdens and the things that stress us out to the Lord. So our eyes look to the Lord our God until he shows his mercy. It's interesting there, this key word is this key word is until. So, hold on, I've just lost where I'm reading. One sec. The key word in this verse is until. There is an expectation we will see mercy from the Lord. It is not a maybe, a yes, a no, and a no or a maybe. It's until we see his mercy. So this is a period of waiting expectantly before it happens in your life. God's covenant people were expecting to inhabit the promised land, but it took 40 years for it to happen. God's covenant people were expected to go back to Jerusalem when they were in Babylon in exile, but it took 70 years for that to happen. God's covenant people today expect Jesus' second coming, and we've been waiting 2,000 years, but we still expect it to happen. On a personal level, I don't know what you're expecting or waiting on for God. You may well be looking to God to do something in your life which is good and noble and does line up with Scripture. And to be honest with you, I don't know if it's going to happen. That's between you and God. What I do know is that everlasting life is promised to those who believe in Jesus. So even if your life feels like one big descent, in our resurrection bodies we will have an everlasting state of ascent. This moment in time will pass, and our lives in the here and now on earth, it's not our final destination. It's just a brief stop before we ascend into something better. Have mercy on us, Lord. Have mercy on us, for we have no end of contempt. So the question is, who do you think you are? No, seriously, who do you think you are? Jesus was treated with contempt, and as a follower of Jesus, you might also be treated with contempt. The good news is that Jesus rose from the dead, and Pontius Pilate died, and he's still dead. The Roman Empire died, they lost, Jesus won. When I googled the words Christian and contempt, I found some articles that were the reverse of what I expected. Some headlines such as, "Some Christians deserve our anger and contempt," was one of the headlines in the articles in the Google search. Now, would anybody write an article saying some Muslims or some Hindus or maybe even some nutty Scientologists deserve our anger and contempt? I doubt it, but it seems as if on some level we're fair game. And I know, considering the rest of the world, we're in a privileged position, and maybe in other parts of the world there's greater contempt for Christians, but even so in the Western world there seems to be this creeping narrative coming in. If you are treated with contempt, it is important to keep your eyes on God and walk closely with him. And in the fourth and final verse, we have endured no end of ridicule from the arrogant and contempt of the proud. So here we have a repeated lament about the contempt in the final verse, as well as the words, we have endured no end of ridicule from the arrogant. No doubt God's people had ridicule in the past. When the Israelites were in slavery in Egypt, no doubt they would have been taunted. Your God has forsaken you. The Egyptians' God must be more powerful than your gods, Israel. But no, that's not the case. God's judgment came upon the Egyptian empire. No doubt when God's people were in exile in Babylon, that they would have been mocked for singing songs about Israel and Jerusalem in their exile. But again, the Babylonian Empire is consigned to the archives of history, and the Jewish people are back in their land. As for us today, when we have a descent in life, no doubt there's maybe atheist or someone else saying, all right, then where's your God then? But when you leave earth, there will be two options. Jesus saying to you, well done, my good and faithful servant, or Jesus saying to you, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. This is why it's important to look to God, to do our best to keep his law and remain faithful to his word. Amen.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you very much. As we kind of prepare for a time of confession, again, it's not a time of humiliation, right? It's a time of humility. And it's just a time where we kind of sit back and we say, God, we acknowledge. To confess literally means to say the same as. It's to acknowledge a truth. And so there might be whatever from anything Lee has shared or from something else in the week where you kind of, ooh, yeah, I'm feeling that a little bit. And I need to just offer that to God. In confession, we're just offering the truth to God. The truth about where we're at, the truth about what the last week has been like, or whatever else. But we want to take a little bit of time to give space for that to happen. So I'd like to invite the worship team up to lead us in song. We're going to stand, we're going to sing before we have our words of confession. So let's stand, please.